5 mail-order brides were being sold off in a saloon until a lonely rancher kicked down the door, beginning the frontier of two worlds. The frontier town of Dust Haven wasn't like any other town on Earth or anywhere in the stars. It was built on a half-terraformed planet called Cowboy 9, where endless plains of red grass stretched out under sun that burned twice as bright as soul. Wooden saloons, tin-roofed blacksmith shops, and dirt roads looked almost like an old Wild West settlement from Earth's history, except for the glowing hover wagons and the towering energy turbines that hummed in the distance. Cowboy 9 was a colony for outlaws, dreamers, and those who didn't belong anywhere else. The law was weak here, justice weaker, and money meant everything. Tonight, the saloon in Dust Haven was more alive than ever. The swinging doors banged open and shut as gamblers, prospectors, and hire guns spilled in, the air thick with smoke and the sour smell of alien liquor. At the center of the room stood a wooden platform. On it were 5 young women bound by the wrists with glowing plasma cuffs, their faces pale and terrified. They were mail-order brides, or so the barkeep claimed, women brought from Earth and other colonies under false promises of a better life, only to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. 5 fine brides, shouted Jorgen Pike, the saloon owner and slaver, his fat voice booming. Strong, healthy, and ready to serve. The kind of women a man needs out here in the roughs. Bidding starts at 200 credits. Men in dust-stained coats leaned forward with hungry eyes, their hands twitching near holsters or credit chips. In the corner, someone muttered, "No law is going to stop this. Not here." They were right. The sheriff of Dust Haven had been bought long ago. No one would lift a hand to stop Jorgen Pike. No one, except for the man about to kick down the door. The rancher arrives. Miles away, in the deep stretches of red prairie, Elias Creed sat on the porch of his lonely ranch. His house was a small thing of wood and steel, the fences around his land barely holding against the stampeding herds of horned grazers. He was a quiet man, broad-shouldered, with lines on his face that spoke of both sorrow and hard work. For years, he had lived alone, raising cattle and fixing machines under the unforgiving twin sons. His wife had died during the early colony days, leaving him with nothing but land and silence. Folks called him the Ghost Rancher, because he spoke little, kept to himself, and carried grief like a second shadow. But that night, when one of his ranch hands rode out of Dust Haven to warn him of what was happening in the saloon, something in Elias stirred. 5 women, the boy said, his voice shaking. They're selling them off like cattle. Elias. Ain't right at all. Elias stood slowly. His old revolver, polished and deadly, hung at his hip. It wasn't just any revolver. It was a plasma-etched 6-shooter from the old wars, one of the few left that could pierce armor plating. He strapped it on, mounted his hover horse, and rode hard into the night. By the time he reached Dust Haven, the saloon was roaring with laughter, bets, and cruelty. Elias dismounted, boots crunching on dust. His eyes narrowed at the light spilling out the swinging doors. With one heavy kick, he smashed the doors open. The room went dead silent. Elias Creed stood framed in the doorway, coat flapping in a hot wind, revolver gleaming at his side. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the platform where the 5 terrified women stood. "Untie them," Elias said, his voice low, dangerous. Jorgen Pike laughed, though his laughter wavered under the weight of that stare. Now, Creed, this ain't your business. Go back to your ranch. These here brides are property, bought and paid for." Elias stepped forward. "They ain't property. Not while I'm breathing." The saloon erupted with shouts. Hands went to guns. Men shifted in their seats, unsure whether to fight or flee. Middle, the gunslingers stand. The first bidder, a scarred prospector with a cybernetic arm, sneered. "You gonna take on all of us, Creed? For a few women you don't even know." Elias's revolver spun into his hand with lightning speed. A shot rang out, and the man's drink shattered in his grasp, burning liquid spilling down his chest. "I don't bluff," Elias said coldly. The room froze again. The brides looked at him with wide eyes, hope flickering where there had been none. But Jorgen Pike wasn't about to lose his merchandise. He raised his hand, signaling the mercenaries he kept hidden in the shadows. From the far corners of the saloon, 4 men in black dusters rose, their weapons humming with plasma charge. They were no drunken ranchers or gamblers. They were killers for hire, seasoned with blood. "Kill him," Pike spat. The bride screamed as the mercenaries drew. Elias dug behind the table as plasma bolts tore through the air, splintering wood and shattering bottles. He rolled, came up on one knee, and fired. One mercenary dropped, chest smoking from a precise shot. The crowd scattered in panic, overturning tables and crashing through windows to escape the crossfire. Elias moved like a man possessed, every shot of his revolver an extension of his will. He ducked low, fired twice more, and another merc fell. But one got close, swinging a blade crackling with energy. Elias barely caught the strike on his revolver's barrel, sparks flying. With a grunt, he slammed the man back and fired point blank, sending him crashing into the wall. The last mercenary aimed from the stairs, taking careful sight. Elias spun, but before he could fire, one of the brides, dark-haired, fierce-eyed, kicked the merc's arm. His shot went wide, and Elias finished him with a single pull of the trigger. The saloon was silent again, save for the crackle of broken lights and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Jorgen Pike trembled, backing toward the door. "Why, you don't know what you've done, Creed. These women weren't just mine. They belong to the syndicate. You've just signed your death warrant." Elias strode forward, grabbed Pike by the collar, and threw him across the bar. "Then tell the syndicate I'll be waiting up." He turned to the platform. With a few quick shots, he destroyed the plasma cuffs binding the brides. The women collapsed into one another's arms, free for the first time in weeks. The journey through the plains. Elias knew they couldn't stay. The syndicate was powerful, stretching across the colonies like a shadow. Dust Haven would soon be crawling with hunters. He led the 5 women out into the night, where his hover horse waited. Of course, one mount was enough. They fled on foot across the open plains until Elias guided them to an old shack hidden in the canyons, a safe house from his war days. Around the fire that night, the women spoke their stories. One was a nurse from Earth, promised honest work, but sold into slavery. Another had been fleeing debt collectors. A third had been lured by promises of marriage to a wealthy rancher, only to find herself chained. The fierce-eyed one, who had helped Elias in the fight, introduced herself last. "My name is Mara," she said, "and I won't be a victim again." Elias respected that fire in her voice, but he also knew the road ahead would test them all. For days, he taught them how to ride hover horses, how to shoot, and how to survive on Caraway 9's harsh plains. They grew stronger, their fear hardening into determination. Elias, who had long closed his heart, felt it stirring again, especially when Mara met his gaze across the firelight. But their peace was short-lived. The syndicate strikes back. Word spread fast. The syndicate put a bounty on Elias Creed's head, dead or alive. Soon, hunters came in droves. The first ambush hit them on the edge of the canyon. Raiders and armored skiffs thundered down, plasma rifles blazing. Elias and the women fought back, their shots echoing across the rocks. Mara proved deadly accurate, dropping raiders with calm precision. But the syndicate had endless men. Every town they passed turned cold, fearful. No one would help them. At last, Elias realized there was only one way out. They had to face the syndicate directly. "They'll keep hunting you," he told the brides one night, his voice steady, "unless we cut off the head." "The head?" Mara asked. "The syndicate boss on Caraway 9. Name's Valor Kane. He runs his empire out of Ironspire. We end him and you'll be free." The women exchanged nervous glances, but none refused, ending the last gunfight. Ironspire was a city of steel and fire, the syndicate's fortress. Towers of black metal loomed over smog-filled streets. Elias and the brides rode in at dawn, disguised under cloaks. They slipped through alleys, past guards, until they reached the syndicate's hall. Inside, Valor Kane waited, a tall, cruel man with silver eyes and a voice like venom. "So," Kane said, smiling thinly, "the lonely rancher who thinks himself a hero. You've caused me a great deal of trouble." Elias stepped forward, revolver at his side. "This ends tonight." The hall exploded in violence. Syndicate enforcers poured in, weapons blazing. Elias and the brides fought side by side, each woman proving her courage. The nurse tended wounds as she fired. Mara fought like a storm, never missing a shot. At last, Elias faced Kane himself. The syndicate boss drew a sleek plasma pistol, its barrel glowing. "You can't kill progress, Creed," Kane sneered. Elias's eyes hardened. "But I can kill you." They drew at the same instant. Kane's pistol fired first, but Elias was faster. His revolver spat fire, and Kane staggered back, a hole burning through his chest. The syndicate leader collapsed, his empire crumbling with him. When the smoke cleared, the bride stood free at last. The city whispered their bravery, of the rancher who defied the syndicate and won. Epilogue. Months later, Elias Creed returned to his ranch, but he was no longer alone. The 5 women, now free, chose their own paths. Some left for other colonies, others stayed to build new lives. Mara remained with Elias. Together, they rebuilt the ranch, turning it into a refuge for those with nowhere else to go. The plains of Caraway 9 were still wild, still dangerous. But under the twin suns, the rancher was no longer a ghost. He was a protector, a guardian, and beside him stood those he had saved. And when travelers asked about the day Elias Creed kicked down the saloon doors, the story was told again and again until it became legend.